Hello, everyone. We are live. Thank you for tuning in to Promethean Actions question and answer show we do live every Thursday at 11 a.m. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Adam Sturman. I'm a producer, webmaster. I do a little bit of everything here at Promethean Action. I'm joined with the lovely Susan Kokinda and Barbara Boyd. You probably know them. You probably know them from our 3 times a week political updates we do here on the channel. So as we're warming up the stream here, why don't you let us know where you're currently viewing from? We have viewership from all over the world, especially the United Kingdom and Canada. Thank you, everyone. Iowa. Hello, Dennis from Berkeley Springs. Thank you for tuning in again. Here everyone comes. Our stream is a few seconds delayed here. Florida, Arizona. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in into the chat, especially. I try to keep it uncensored as possible. Okay, so let me get started. I think people have been watching the news, so they kind of have a sense about what's going on. There was rumors about last week that there was going to be this meeting with Trump and Putin. It was never scheduled, but it was discussed. It got leaked to the news media. That's now been supposedly, again, put on the back burner. We have new sanctions now coming in against Russian oil firms, Rosneft and Lukoil, and what appears to be quite a few of their subsidiaries. And Trump just made a quick statement. Hopefully, Putin will become reasonable. So there's still a lot of tension going on with those peace negotiations in the Ukraine. We're also going to be discussing Gaza, the fragile peace that's going on there. Tariffs and inflation. We still have people. We know in some states, gas prices haven't really gone down that much. While in other states, we've seen huge changes. So we're going to be talking about that. Singapore. Cool. Thank you for tuning in from Singapore, Australia. Awesome. Okay, so let's start with some opening statements. Susan, Barbara, do you have any opening statements, especially what's going on with Russia and the Ukraine war?
Yeah, I'll start because I think it's really important for people to stay very focused and very grounded, just as was the case during the Mideast. If you tried to solve the crisis in the Mideast based on what you were seeing in social media feeds or talking heads, the fighting would still be going on. Diplomacy does not take place in the domain of CNN headlines or Truth Social posts. So I want to kind of take a step back because obviously Trump and Putin did meet. They did agree that they're going to meet in Budapest. And then a couple of days ago, the headline started saying meeting has been canceled, which was based on a leak, an unidentified leak from inside the administration. You could perhaps guess what the political loyalties of whoever that leaker was. Adam, could you share the screen? I want to show you the response of the Russians to this. This is from TASS. Media outlets spread fake news to undermine upcoming Russia-USA summit. That's from Kirill Dmitriev, who has been he's an official in the Russian government, the head of their sovereign wealth fund, and a very strong advocate for repairing U.S.-Russian relations. The foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, he also came out and said basically that this is fake news. The timing of the talks had never been settled. When Trump was asked about it in the Oval Office the other day, he just said, well, there's a lot of preparation, and it actually has to be a summit which accomplishes something, which has always been his approach. And it's frankly always been Putin's approach. We're not going to get together for a photo op. Lavrov and Marco Rubio had an extensive conversation over the phone in preparation for a future summit. And of course, President Trump is leaving early next week for the ASEAN and OPEC summits, APEC, the two major multilateral Asian summits. So obviously this meeting with Putin was not going to happen before that. The other major explosion in the media, which would make you think that Trump has fallen to the neocons once again, is a leak in the Wall Street Journal that the United States approved the use of Storm Shadow missiles. I need the screen one more time, Adam. The Storm Shadow missiles that hit Russia. Well, here's what Trump said. The Wall Street Journal story on the USA's approval of Ukraine being allowed to use long-range missiles into Russia is fake news. The United States has nothing to do with those missiles, wherever they may come from, or what Ukraine does with them. So you can take that down. Now, it's also the case, as of yesterday, the Russians had not even confirmed that it was Storm Shadows. It could simply have been drones. But what you can see from all of this is the efforts by the empire to keep tensions at an all-time high. In the wake of, again, another historic discussion between Trump and Putin. And let's not forget the optics of that phone call with Trump and Putin. They were on the phone for 2.5 hours while Zelensky was landing in Washington, D.C. for a meeting with Trump the next day. He wasn't greeted by any official delegation. I mean, it was the equivalent of him having to call an Uber. So let's keep the larger scenario on the stage in your mind as you get buffeted back and forth by these things. Now, it is the case that we did impose new sanctions yesterday. What I'll say about it, and Barbara may want to add, to my way of thinking, this is how Trump negotiates. He is frustrated. He wants this war to end. And so he's going to keep upping the pressure on both sides. The problem a lot of people have when they try and analyze these things is they've taken a side. They look at everything from the standpoint of the Ukraine side or the Russian side or the Palestinian or the Hamas side or the Israeli side. Trump doesn't operate from the standpoint of sides. His intention is peace. And, he doesn't fall into the cubby holes that the British have created over a long period of time to keep people trapped in these positions. Trump doesn't have a position. He has an intention. And I believe his intention is peace. Now, what is he up against? He's up against the British and the Europeans whose intention is war. That is a complicating factor in the Russia-Ukraine situation. So that's what I would say about it. Barbara, I'm sure you might want to add a few words.
Yeah, I just think people have to look at the overall dynamic insofar as we can see it. What Susan emphasized, I think, is very important. If you look at what happened in terms of the Gaza negotiation and really school yourself in that, you'll see that most of the key things about it were never in the public theater that goes on around various acts of diplomacy. The central feature of the entire dynamic in the Middle East is the Abraham Accords and trying to basically get outside forces into solving the issue of Gaza, other than Israel, and to get Netanyahu and the crazy settlers movement to actually stand down. Very complicated series of negotiations. Here we have, basically Europe and, except for Hungary, who just got their oil refinery blown up, and various other forces, including the Brits, essentially, backing Zelensky for full-scale war. So what was Trump presented with as of yesterday? Floated in the press is the claim by the Europeans and Zelensky that we're not going to cede any territory, not just the small portion of the Donbass, which is, Donetsk, which is the argument which is going on now, but we're not going to cede anything. So what are you going to have a summit about if there isn't a way to cudgel these jerks and insane people into line? And that is the actual thing I think Trump is thinking about. So if he had something with Putin at this point without actually figuring out how he's going to handle Mark Rutte and the other idiots, then it would be a failure. He wants peace, and he wants it now. And where his frustration with Putin is never going to say, I'm going to basically cede any portion of Donetsk, because that is historically the whole reason for the war in the first place. It's those Donbass regions which also not incidentally hold the most important mineral resources and other things which Ukraine has to sell, which is another dynamic here. If Putin can't do that because these citizens have already voted that they wanted to join Russia. From the Russian perspective, these oblasts, as they call them in Ukraine, are already Russian territory. So that's the difficult kind of situation which the president is facing, and he really does want peace. The sanctions are not going to do anything, quite frankly. It's just theater, in my view, and I think Trump knows that. China has already said, we oppose the sanctions, we're not going to go along with them, forget about it. The claim is that India will go along with them. I doubt it, okay, but Trump is saying that Modi has agreed to that. But it is a pressure point on Putin in terms of, really let's get together and talk realistically. I think there's also a problem with the intelligence the president is getting, and I'll be frank about that. I have suspected it. He's been told that Putin wants all of Ukraine. I think that is a dubious proposition. He's been told all sorts of things about Russian losses and about the Russian economy. I think also those are dubious ideas. The problem we have with the intelligence services is that in the CIA and other places, people who do the analysis, even if they're not politically, estranged from the Trump administration, don't necessarily even speak the language. And every kind of thing that goes on in a country like that, if you just take Israel as an example, what's said in the Israeli language press are the key things that are actually happening. That's where people actually discuss things. So if you're an analyst coming from the outside and you don't understand the language, you've lost the whole aspect of what should be analyzed. So I agree with that statement. He's not going to give up either Crimea or the Donbass. And that's the sticking point. And the other sticking point, which it has to be looked at from both President Trump's situation and Putin's situation, is what do we do with the fact that these Europeans want to continue the war? Even if we make an agreement, how does it get enforced if what's going on is the European countries actually continue the war? And frankly, they're up against reality. The most recent Gallup poll shows 22% of Ukrainians actually support continued fighting. Those that are not already, those who haven't already fled Ukraine because of the war. So it's a Rubik's Cube, if you will, of very, very difficult problems. And you can't take any moment in the dismantling of the cube here as being the definitive moment.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. All right, I want to give a quick shout out to our awesome people in the chat. I didn't put this up earlier just to dispel any rumors, but Bill Vickers amusingly says, allegedly there are rumors circulating that Barbara's corgi was personally gifted by a late member of the royal family, which is just a rumor. Thank you very much, Bill, for joining us every week. We super appreciate your support. We also have give a quick shout out to Jackie. Thank you for your live reporting. I learn a lot from you all. Have a good day. Thank you, Jackie, for your support. We get messages like this all the time. We'll put some of these in the chat. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we hope you get our newsletter. That's where most of these questions are going to be coming from today. It's going to be coming from our newsletter subscribers, If you don't yet know, we have a daily newsletter, which we send out. It has every time we post a new video, every time we go live. We've been posting more articles, written articles recently. All of that is in our newsletter. So if you're interested in getting our newsletter, the link is right there. You can just go to prom.ac or search the web for Promethean Action. And the link to subscribe is right on the front page. It's pretty easy to see. So get our free newsletter. It allows us to stay in contact with you outside of Google and YouTube's control. And also, I see we have about 1,000 people tuning in currently. Thank you so much, everyone. Please hit the like button if you've been enjoying the broadcast so far. It helps us reach a wider audience on YouTube. Okay, so I'm going to get started here with some questions from our newsletter. And we're going to be continuing on this theme of Russia because it's probably one of the most important issues at the moment. So the first question here is from Michael. What strategies from President Trump's peace through strength doctrine could be applied to swiftly negotiate ceasefires in Ukraine, building on his recent successes in brokering deals between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo? Thank you, Michael, for the question.
Well, I'll just say, I mean, I think Barbara largely answered this. And let's be honest, Trump has said this is the toughest of them all. And I will add, I think the reason that it's the toughest of them all is he's not just negotiating with Ukraine and Russia. As Barbara said, the British, the Europeans are intent on keeping this war going. This is a critical aspect of the globalists, the British imperial elites' efforts to stop Donald Trump. He's back in office. He's negotiating incredible things. He's dismantling the entire globalist system piece by piece. Doesn't happen overnight. But if you look at how he's recasting the economy of the United States, the kind of deals he's making with other countries, so put yourself in the shoes of this imperial elite. They have not been able to stop him. So they're going to try and keep these wars going. And I think, again, because of the European and in particular the British role in keeping this thing going, which goes all the way back to Boris Johnson sabotaging the original peace deal way back in 2022, it's going to be more difficult. It is proving to be more difficult than any of the other crises he's faced, including what everybody thought was impossible in the Mideast. So I don't think there's anything new to apply to swiftly negotiate this, but I think Trump is intent on doing it. And I think he's brought something, well, I think the Russians have brought something new into this, which has been discussed in some areas broadly by us, and that is the question of a Bering Straits tunnel between Alaska and Russia to actually bring these two continents together. This is big. This is the kind of great project that will strengthen the economic sovereignty of any nation involved in it. This is the kind of thing the empire hates. So I think this is a new element that's been brought into it. But again, you're dealing with a very desperate, very hysterical empire, which is going to do everything in its power to keep this thing going.
Okay, and let's take the next question here. How imminent is the Russian-Ukraine war spreading to Poland now? The Polish Department of Defense began mobilization of men aged 18 to 60. It seems inevitable, especially that there's no consensus between our president, who does not want the war, and Prime Minister Tusk, who is driving us to war. What are your thoughts about it? Thank you, Jania. Jania from Poland, thank you for asking a question and for tuning in live again. So I open the floor to Barbara and Susan.
Well, I think you are blessed in Poland now. If the new president hadn't been voted in by the population, which is the key answer to the question, then you'd really have a drive for war, because Tusk and that other idiot foreign minister you have, are actually dedicated to the idea of the war. I think in terms of European populations that it is extremely important to figure out a way to voice the fact that you do not agree with this war. If you look at one of the most important components of the Gaza peace deal, which was just negotiated, is that Israelis were in the streets and building and building and building around the protest that the hostages' lives came ahead of any designs for greater Israel by Netanyahu. And the Israeli population deserves much, much credit for coming out, getting politically active, not being violent, waging a decent protest movement, which became incredibly powerful and could not be ignored. It was on the front pages of the media every single day, and it helped the negotiations. Something like that has to happen in every single European nation and member of NATO at this point to get this thing back on track towards actual peace. And that's how I'd answer your question.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, everyone. Again, I just want to give a quick shout out to our chat members. I see people are still coming in. Thank you for tuning in. This is our live question and answer show we do every Thursday. Please smash the like button. It really does help our broadcast reach more people on YouTube. All right, so the next set of questions is really the next topic that most people have on their mind. And the media is doing a very good job at really using this against the American people. I think Barbara and Susan are going to have to say a lot about these. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up a question from BW, who's another frequent live viewer. Thank you very much, BW, for tuning in. And your question is going to lead in this next section on economics. If the shutdown keeps on, food stamps gone in November just in time for holiday. This will be blamed on Trump. What can he do? October 31st means no food stamps in Louisiana. Okay. But this is why I brought up the gas prices too, because the media is really pushing, trying to split the Trump base on this economics issue. So let me pull this up. Okay, Trump is always touting how inflation is down and prices are down. But where we live in Commie, Pennsylvania, we have only seen the opposite. And this is going on in other states too. Prices on groceries, building materials, and gas have steadily gone up and are still rising. Is this because our state economy is controlled by a blue government, or is it corporate greed which is blaming it on the tariffs? Thanks for answering the question and for sharing the real truth. I'm going to read the next one. The price of gold keeps skyrocketing. However, I do know that there was some softness in the metal market there. And the gold market is actually the metal market has been really rocky over the past several weeks. Okay, so if a dollar buys less gold than it did in the past inflation, if Trump is not able to relax his desire to have a cheap dollar, inflation is going to become a bigger issue with gold getting higher. Well, we'll see about that. The price of gold has been really stuttering over the past few weeks. A strong dollar, in my view, has never hurt a country. If inflation is not gotten under control, the midterms will be very difficult for the party and power, which I'm sure you know. What is the recommendation? Thank you, Edward. And when we look at the world, myriad countries are in a far worse situations fiscally and from debt and entitlements perspective than the United States. That said, our situation isn't ideal, and Trump has his work cut out for him in terms of boosting growth above our past few decades of realized gains in a mature economy such as ours. Is this perspective flawed thinking? What type of economic growth is realistically attainable in the next few years, given Trump's efforts in his second term? What level of inflation is projected over that period, so as to determine how much real growth we should expect? And what type of debt growth is projected over the same time period? Okay, There are so many conflicting assumptions that mostly appear bearish on Trump's impact on all these areas. It seems like if he can't fix much of this, the communists who scapegoat capitalism for everything will have another feather in their cap. Could be a pivotal undercurrent, particularly if Trump's mission isn't carried forward by the next administration and or if he's greatly stymied due to losing Congress in the midterms. Thank you, Gabor. Okay, I open this to Barbara and Susan.
Well, there's a lot of stuff there, but I think what's important is to you have to, in your mind, when you're thinking about these kinds of things, you have to separate the actual physical economy, which is what Trump and his administration are singularly focused on repairing and rebuilding, and then the financialized side of all of this. Yeah, Melody just put in there, gas is down to $2.50, eggs are $3.50, pretty much similar here in Michigan, and even though we're a blue state, believe it or not. Other states, have higher gas. I mean, I know many of the blue states, like the West Coast, they're still completely insane because you have insane governors with insane policies. But what Trump is doing, and it's important for people to understand this, and it's important for people to communicate to their congressmen, I think especially their Republican congressmen, that they have to stay the course. Fundamentally, the question of inflation, yes, it's impacted by the value of the dollar. It's impacted at the moment by financial markets. But all of that it's impacted because going all the way back to 1971, we began a process where we divorced these financial values from the physical economy in order to allow the financial values to grow like a cancer at the expense of the physical economy. What Trump is doing in an environment which has been completely financialized over the past 50 years, an environment in which what he calls the global financier elite, those are his terms, have ruled the roost in terms of setting financial and economic policy above nations. Trump is engaged in a titanic effort, which is underway to reorient the economy toward actual physical growth. That's obviously the importance of the tariffs. That's obviously the importance of many of the things in the One Big Beautiful Bill, like 100% expensing. What does that mean? If you're a company and you bring your factory and you decide you're going to reshore to the United States and you got to build a new facility in the United States, under that recently passed One Big Beautiful Bill, you're going to be able to take off 100% of the expense of building that factory off your taxes in the first year. I don't think that's ever been done in that way before. And you have to do it within the next 2 to 3 years. In other words, Trump is saying to these corporations, get your butts back here and start building. Now, Peter Navarro gave an incredible speech to the Council on Foreign Relations. It's like walking into the lion's den last week. And I cover it fairly extensively in my midweek update. But there was something in his speech which was extremely important because, he was getting all sorts of hostile questions from these creatures from the establishment. And one of them was, manufacturing jobs have dropped. In other words, your policies are failing. And he said, look, construction is just starting. What has he lined up? They've lined up, I think, close to $20 trillion in investment. So construction is just starting. Now, there is going to be, I guarantee you're going to see an increase in construction jobs, skilled trade jobs, and so on. But Navarro made the obvious point. You're not going to see the impact on the manufacturing jobs till the plants get built. 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the road. So what they're engaged in is a fundamental reshaping of the U.S. economy where we return it to what we've always called, what has always been called and what we revived as the American system of economics, where your economics is based on what you physically produce and your ability to improve your physical production. through new technologies, better educated population, scientific breakthroughs, and so on. That's the American system. The British system is based on pure financialization. So some of the questions, sort of got into some of the finer points of the financialized side of things and the relationship of the financialized side of things to the physical economy, which, start to get into somewhat, difficult areas. But I think what's important is for people to stay very, very focused on the fact that Trump is doing something fundamental in terms of reshaping the US economy, and it's not going to happen overnight. So that's what I would say. Barbara might want to add something. She may want to add to the answer specifically the question about the shutdown in food stamps. So that's what I'd say.
Yeah, I think that the issue here is time, as Susan emphasized. We're rebuilding the economy from scratch. All right, what Trump was left with, he said yesterday in the gaggle with the NATO guy, is basically an economy which was headed towards complete collapse, and indeed in Europe and other places, the question is whether they're in a depression or simply a recession because of their crazy policies, particularly around energy. In terms of the shutdown, most of the polling is now showing that people are blaming the Democrats for it. And I think, the messaging coming from the White House could be better, because what the issue boils down to, if you really look at it, is their contention is that they want to provide, these Obamacare subsidies to tons and tons and tons of illegal immigrants, but it also hits, other people in terms of what's going on with Obamacare. And that's really a conundrum which the Democrats are sort of trying to exploit, because Obamacare in reality was and is a bailout for the insurance companies. And nobody that I've seen on the horizon in the Republican Party has come forth with any kind of answer to how do we fix this thing? How do we fix this thing? So you've got a very seductive process where tons and tons and tons of MAGA people in red states are on Obamacare because of the insanity of what the healthcare system has become. It's completely financialized. And we've got to come up with an answer fairly quickly to that, because it is a real pain point, and the Jacobin Democrats are exploiting it. They don't have an answer. Their answer is, single payer for all. And that in turn will not in any way actually help out the average citizen, because we're still dealing with, kind of a way of conducting medicine which is completely financialized as opposed to actually focusing on cures and other things. So Trump has undertaken an offensive about that in terms of drug prices, which he's, basically lowering for everybody, including seniors. He's taken, Bobby Kennedy and others are now taking an approach where they're essentially saying, we have to basically get healthy. If we continue on this trend line where, basically we've got a whole cohort of the population, almost 70%, who are very unhealthy and, basically casualties of the way medicine has been conducted in the last period. So I agree with you. It is a problem, but it's a problem of the Democrats, a problem of the people who are actually trying to tear down the country. And we most certainly have to do ourselves a little bit better analysis of that and putting forward ideas about how we solve the problem.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. I want to give a quick shout out to Kitten Magic. I wish the super stickers would come through into the video, but she sent a really cute corgi sticker. Thank you for joining us, Kitten Magic. We depend on the support of all of our viewers and readers to keep doing this. We don't do any corporate readouts in our show. We're not sponsored by, we don't do like sponsored items or sponsored service readouts. So thank you very much for the support. We really appreciate and depend on it. Okay, the next questions. We're going to continue on this issue of domestic Democrat. Let's see here. No, we're going to actually, let's take one on the tariffs first here. Okay. And this probably, I should have grouped this in, but I think the tariffs are kind of I wanted to address the tariffs directly. Can you give any clarity on the case brought against Trump's tariffs? It's worrisome, and I wanted to know if you think there's a legitimate case here. Thanks. And thank you, Bruce, for the question. So a lot of people still have questions on Trump's tariffs. The media is really pushing this hard, trying to drive a wedge. So I open this up again to Barbara and Susan.
Well, the claim in the case is that, basically there wasn't an economic emergency. And therefore the tariffs are somehow illegal because there wasn't an economic emergency. If you look at the country and what most people voted for on November, putting Trump in the White House, the population thinks there's an economic emergency. They're being ripped apart because the cost of living has hit them so directly. So that's what the case is going to be about. There are alternative authorities which Trump can use to do the tariffs. But essentially, all of these things come down to, is there an emergency going on or not? And the Democrats are arguing that Joe Biden's administration, an administration in which, we didn't have a president, we had a vegetable sitting in the White House. Somehow everything that went on under that is legitimate, and Trump didn't inherit an economy which he had to basically begin rebuilding from scratch. And I think that's an emergency. I think it's an emergency in terms of the people. So that's what is going to be discussed at the Supreme Court. There are alternative theories for imposing tariffs, but Trump took the radical approach, which is the right approach, and said, we're in an economic emergency, therefore this is what I'm going to do. Take the tariffs around fentanyl, for example. Is it an emergency or not that 300,000 people, 300,000 Americans, many, many, many of them being young people, are being poisoned every year and dying? Is that an emergency? I think so. But, I think the Supreme Court has to really, get its ducks in a row and back this up. Trump yesterday said he was very concerned about it. And, it could go the other way, but there's always, additional authorities for imposing those tariffs. So that's what I'd say about that.
Thank you, Barbara. I just got a funny super chat. I think I'm going to pull it off. I can't tell if people are being serious or like triply ironic. The Epstein Memorial Ballroom. And maybe just retire this whole thing once and for all, name them. And there's actually, I didn't bring this up. I was thinking about bringing this up in the introduction. There actually is a lot of controversy. So I believe they're trying to launch some legal blocking, procedural blocking, because Trump wants to remove, I believe it's the East Wing or part of the East Wing to do the ballroom. So you have this historical group. So there's a lot of controversy going over the ballroom too. But thank you for the super chat. We appreciate it. Okay, quick shout out here to Promethean Action. If you're just tuning in with us live or for the first time, this is a live question and answer show. You can see here we have some merch. We also have coffee mug here. I'm also wearing the t-shirt. Let me just put that up. If you're interested in supporting us and getting a t-shirt or getting a coffee cup, I'm going to put the t-shirt there, but you can follow the link for the t-shirt and get the coffee cup. This is a live question and answer show we do every Thursday here on YouTube. We're also broadcasting to x.com. We do this live broadcast every Thursday at the same time, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. UK time. Please like this video if you haven't yet already. It really helps increase our reach on YouTube. And if you subscribe and hit the bell here on YouTube, you'll get our notification. We do 3 political updates a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. So we'll be releasing our next political update on Saturday. So subscribe, hit the notifications bell, and hopefully you'll get a notification from YouTube. All right, the next one, I said I was going to take these next ones on the Democratic Party here and Antifa violence. Okay, here. Thank you all for taking my question. What will it take to restore peace inside America? Considering the serious threats from within Antifa and also the Democratic lawfare, which is out of control, the Trump administration is doing an amazing job and have a powerful MAGA base, but Antifa is a global terrorist organization. What would it take to drive this kind of threat out? And can the Trump presidency achieve it and also counter any potential election fraud against them? Thanks. Thank you, Ann, for the question. So I'm going to open this to Barbara and Susan.
Well, Ann is correct in terms of Antifa being a globalist entity. The people who actually are funding this thing, primarily George Soros, Arabella Advisors, the actual funding mechanisms of the Democratic Party, the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation. People might be surprised when they hear those names associated with the terrorist group. But in terms of the Ford Foundation, that has been a long-standing kind of policy of that foundation. When our former organization was actually forming, and there were, student strikes at Columbia University and elsewhere, there were actual Antifa-type gangs being supported by the Ford Foundation who were acting within that environment. So what Trump is doing is tracking the funding and figuring out how do we actually, some of which is foreign. You have this Swiss guy by the name of Wyss who gives a lot. You have, Neville Lloyd Singham, who's the Chicago billionaire who lives in China, who gives a lot. But that was the point of that very interesting October 8th meeting at the White House, to give a tracking of the funding and defeat this idea, which was floated by the Biden FBI, that Antifa is not an organization, it's an idea. Nothing could be more convenient to actually keeping a terrorist gang going than not to investigate them fully in terms of who funds them, what their actual operations are, looking at what their actual operations are globally. Now, I want to point out one thing which I think is really, really, really important. These types of gangs are not kind of independent setups. The foundations and everything else that are funding them are cutouts, in most cases, for the intelligence community. That's how you get what's called plausible deniability in the jargon of these, spies and other people who actually put forth the plan for this. We're in the middle, in the United States, of a color revolution being conducted not overseas, but against us here in the United States. So all of the funding mechanisms that have been divulged so far, in my last update, I actually gave a bit of a piece on that in detail. But you've got to look also at intelligence agencies involved in the color revolution, because that's who's giving them, for the most part, their marching orders. And I'm hopeful that basically one of the first questions which this investigation should ask is, what's the relationship between Antifa, Black Lives Matter, all of these gangs who show up to commit violence and riots? You could actually call it rent a riot when you're looking at how this thing actually works. What's the relationship to the CIA, to the State Department, to the National Endowment for Democracy, to British intelligence? I think all of those things are critical, and any relationship should be declassified.
Thank you, Barbara. And this next one here is related, and I'm also going to take a super chat too. Again, all on this issue of Democrats. Just to extend the observation of the only cards left, it is also quite conceivable that the current government shutdown by Dems was and is perhaps an additional latch-ditch effort to strategically interfere with the funding apparatus of the White House, expanding intentions to fully deploy law enforcement payrolls to both combat and curtail increasing rioters' violence nationwide, while continuing to underwrite the price tag of necessarily widening law enforcement agencies, detainment facilities, and mass deportation expenses, albeit again rather fruitless Democratic last-ditch strategies. And I'm going to roll that comment in here with Carol. Thank you, Carol, for tuning in and joining us every week. Thank you for the support. What are your thoughts on Tom Luongo and his statements regarding the port and blue states' infiltration of coastal states as a potential threat to supply chain collapse? You know, that is an interesting idea. I believe the largest port in the world is in California. One of the container shipping ports. They huge amounts of goods, and it is a blue state. So again, Barbara and Susan, what are your thoughts?
I'll take that super chat. I've been on a couple of shows with Tom where he's brought this up, where he talks about the potential for civil war in the United States, and that if the blue states are all the coastal areas, they've landlocked the red states. And look, what I've said to Tom is I have no doubt that, somewhere this is a plan by the elites. But the question is where we are politically right now in the United States. And I think that if you look at those famous maps of all the counties that went red, as opposed to the quote blue states, there's just a couple of little enclaves of blue around the United States. That overwhelmingly the population is in favor of sanity, isn't in favor of America first. And, while obviously keeping your eye out on some future scenario by the oligarchy is important, the most important thing that we can do is to continue to educate and mobilize the American population and basically dry out the pool of insane people in this country whereby they could get away with anything like that. And I think we're on our way to doing that. It's one of the reasons why we do what we do in terms of this Q&A, our broadcasts, and our newsletter, to make sure that you have a diminishing crew of people, which I think you saw with the No Kings protests, a diminishing pool of insane people. If you look at the pictures of what in Detroit, I mean, this is just insanity. People were dressing up in unicorn outfits, frog outfits, shark outfits. What is this other than people who have frankly lost any connection to reality? So the most important thing I always think, and I know Barbara agrees in terms of enemy operations, is to increasingly reduce the number of people in the population who are susceptible to it. I don't know if Barbara wants to address any of the rest of that.
Just on that thought, look at what's going on in New Jersey, the bluest of blue states, where the Republican, governor candidate is within 5 points of actually winning that election. Similarly in Virginia, which is kind of also the same thing. Again, the craziness of the Democrats, including the statements by the Attorney General candidate that he wanted to kill the Speaker of the House and two of his children, are turning their craziness into a potential win for Winston Earl Sears as the gubernatorial candidate here. So again, as Susan said, reduce the population of the crazies by actually drawing in everybody you can from the traditional Democratic Party base, because all of those people are left behind by the insanity of the present Democratic Party. And we can right now draw them in, which we need to do in terms of the midterms. So there's got to be a lot of outreach. And I think that basically Trump is very focused on doing exactly that.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. I want to take a quick, again, super chat from TK. Thank you for the support. Answer your question real quick. Do you have a Substack? It's a good platform because it has an AI reader, so you can go through written material while doing things. TK, unfortunately, Promethean Action itself does not have a Substack. We use a platform called Ghost, which is a similar thing, but it doesn't have an AI reader. If you're interested in getting our newsletter, I'll just give a quick shout out to it here. You can go to prom.ac or search the web for Promethean Action. On our website in the lower right-hand corner, there's a subscribe button. Just get the free newsletter. We'll send you updates when we go live every Thursday. We'll send you updates when we post a new video on YouTube, one of our political briefings. And we also are now incorporating more written content into our daily newsletter. So if anyone is interested, please go to prom.ac, search the web for Promethean Action. You'll land on our website. You can get the newsletter there. So thank you very much for your support, TK. We appreciate it. All right, the next question I'm going to take is on a related question, but she references a channel that we have a lot of respect for and we do follow. So I'm going to bring it up here again, but this is still on the topic of the Democrats. Okay, so just a shout out to Steve Turley. We do watch a channel. We appreciate what you're doing. I want to ask a three-part question. Dr. Steve Turley places great emphasis, encouragement on the Supreme Court hearing, the Louisiana versus Calleas, to overturn the Democrats' advantage. You seem to take a more cautious approach as to the dangers of overconfidence leading up to 2026. As a retired pastor who began praying 2 Chronicles 7:14 in early 1980s, I don't know, maybe I should have had that prepared. I believe America has seen or repented of its wicked ways, and that God is healing our land. Would you reflect on the possibility of being, quote, on the same page, but reading different paragraphs? Thank you very much, Mike, for your question or comment.
Well, Louisiana versus Calleas, which people probably aren't necessarily following, is a case challenging the Voting Rights Act at this point in time, and the way that congressional districts are actually put together under the Voting Rights Act in Louisiana, which basically countenance creating, in essence, Black districts in the state to elect Blacks to Congress and to state legislatures and other things. That was something which was deemed necessary as a corrective measure way back when. And my own belief is that it is completely outdated. We don't need any more to basically create Black districts to advantage Black people, because Black people can carry the vote, the entire vote, including the white vote, at this point in time by citizens. It's been shown over and over and over again. So if this Supreme Court rules in terms of Louisiana versus Calleas that is taking away the gerrymandering enforcement mechanism of the Voting Rights Act, that will have a major impact on 2026, because district maps are going to have to be challenged and redrawn. As you know, the second part of the question, I think that God is healing our land, but it really does require the citizen to be in tune with that great healing and spiritual power, and get on board with making America great again in terms of MAGA. So that's how I'd answer your question.
Yeah, and I'd add, in terms of, you know, the different paragraphs on the same page, Dr. Steve keeps people focused on the fact that Trump is on the offensive. And I think that's very important because most of the establishment media and some of the controlled opposition, so-called right-wing media, has a very bad effect on people, deliberately, I think, of just constantly focusing on the enemy is everywhere and, eek. So I think it's important to keep people focused on the offensive side of what the Trump administration is doing. But that being said, on the question of confidence, we also know that even assuming we get this redistricting, some of the other things which are going on, I might mention today or yesterday, Senator Fetterman basically said, look, this shutdown should stop and I'm ready to pay the consequences. So there's a Democratic senator, which I know Dr. Steve focused on a couple of weeks ago in terms of the role that Fetterman could play going forward and so on. All of this is extremely important. But we also know that the enemy operates from the standpoint of not just structures and formalities and districts and, this, that, and the other thing. They operate from the standpoint of psychological warfare. Put yourself back to January 2020. Guess what? Trump had it in the bag. And then what did we get hit with? COVID. Completely unprecedented. Nobody could have, none of us, could have forecast the form that took, how it played out, how it affected the election, and so on. And you had a population which was battered by the most intense psychological warfare operation probably since 9/11 and maybe even worse than that. So our job, the reason that we stay vigilant is because we know that the enemy will, has psychological warfare operations up their sleeve, which you counter in advance by upgrading the thinking capacity of the population so that they're not just spectators, so that they're not just cheering or they're not just freaking out. And there's a whole lot of that going on out there, but are actually on the battlefield with us and with Trump in the critical fight of educating more of our fellow citizens to the actual nature of the fight and to the beautiful future it's going to give us if we bring this thing home. So, yeah, I would say we're on the same page, but slightly different paragraphs.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. Okay, we're about halfway through the show. Barbara's going to have to leave us in about 30 minutes. She has an important appointment to attend to. But we're going to discuss now what people can do to help Trump ensure the next 2026 midterm, because it's really going to be a huge make or break point for the MAGA movement and the MAGA movement's ability to govern into the future, starting in the 2028 election. So I'm going to take the next two questions. The first is from Dave in Texas. Trump has been a brilliant strategist in single-handedly thwarting and diffusing the strategy of tension long used to divide and subjugate the world. How can we best help him flip the world mindset to make villains, wars, and potential disasters feel like outdated, old-fashioned thinking compared to the forward-thinking growth through stewardship and cooperation mindset that Trump embodies? Thank you, Dave from Texas. Second one's very simple. How does Zionism and where does Zionism play a role in all this where Britain is concerned? And how can the average American help President Trump fight or help support President Trump on a local level? Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you, Dave from Texas.
Susan, you want to start that?
Yeah, I think the question is what I just said. How can we best help him flip the world mindset to feel outdated? And I think that's a very, very important formulation, because you think of the difference between, frankly, my generation, Barbara's generation, and I think from our demographics, the generations of a lot of people watching this, we actually lived in a society in the 50s and the 60s, which was optimistic, which was progressing, which was pushing the frontiers. Now, we were hit with massive operations like assassinations, wars, the rock, drug, sex counterculture, which purpose was to make us pessimistic. And unfortunately, it succeeded with a lot of people. Some of us who've been in the battlefield in this fight for 5 decades didn't succumb to the pessimism. That's why we've continued to fight the fight the way we have. But so many people have only lived up until Donald Trump in this kind of pessimistic world. And even a lot of MAGA people still fight this from underneath. That is, they're fighting against all the bad things. And I think implicit in your question is something extremely important, which is you have to give people a vision of what the future, what a productive, successful, optimistic future will be. That's the best way to actually combat them. Now, in terms of the next one, the next question, we can address the question of Zionism a little bit later, but I think I'll turn it back to Barbara to answer. How can the average American help President Trump fight or help support President Trump on a local level? And Adam, if you want to share the screen, we can show people the ammunition we have. Barbara, you want to take up the Promethean Pact question, let people know the difference between our two groups?
So we have 2 operations. We have basically a 501c4 or a policy group, which is Promethean Action, which puts together policy and also emphasizes, just very, very few people actually understand what Trump is doing and the magnitude of it out there, including a lot of Republicans. We've got this little half-page flyer, which shows, in essence, the absolutely critical difference between the old Republican Party, which was the party of Wall Street and the party of the, basically the multinationals and the Chamber of Commerce, Mitch McConnell being a good example of that, versus what Trump is doing, which he says, my operation here is dedicated to workers, to those people who actually build things, to the physical economy and those people who are participating in it, which is a complete, total change in the Republican Party. Our strategy at Promethean Pact, which is a political action committee, is to actually flood the nation with this flyer and have citizens go out, just like you would in any campaign, knock on doors, join organizations, join clubs, but convey this message. This is a revolution going back to, basically Lincoln's Republican Party, which also put its main emphasis on tariffs and on actually protecting the people who build versus the people who simply speculate in, paper. So that's the idea of Promethean Pact. We will be, as the overall 2026, elections begin to take more form, actually out there endorsing certain candidates, telling you why certain people should be opposed. And hopefully, if we can increase our overall budget, producing videos which actually function on this basis to show the people more widely what the stakes are in 2026. And 2026 is, as most people realize, everything. If the Democrats take back the House, and right now it's considered to be a toss-up, whether they will or they won't, then we're going to be in, back to the craziness of the Biden administration, impeachment, all sorts of crap, etc., and we'll be stalled in actually this big change we're taking through the United States. So this is something that everybody has to think about. They have to get off the couch if they're on the couch. They have to get out of the computer if they're on the computer and get out and talk to people. Figure out ways to set up networks, figure out ways to actually get this message across. And that's what I'd emphasize at this point. We'll be doing much, much more in terms of directionality in the next few months as the overall landscape takes shape.
Yeah, and let me just focus on this side of this half-page flyer, which you can get. You can go to the Promethean PAC website. You can order 100 copies for $23, cheap at any price, and it goes up from there. But I want to focus on the back page of this because it gets back to what I said in terms of pessimism versus optimism. If you look at the right-hand side of the columns there, it says the Uniparty, which is pretty much all of the current Democratic Party and the neocon and Wall Street wing of the Republican Party. That's all people were living in until Donald Trump. You know, for decades and decades, you would change parties, but you would have the same policies. They would support free trade. They would support perpetual wars. They would support globalization. The middle class disappeared in the past 30 to 40 years because of the combined policies of the Uniparty. Trump is creating a new Republican Party. I was privileged to be at the national convention that nominated Trump and J.D. Vance, where they adopted a new platform. And that's what's reflected on the left-hand side, the new Republican Party, the party of workers, reshoring our manufacturing, economic nationalism, America first. We build things. We protect our seniors and people who, get Medicare. We restore the middle class. Trump is committed, and every single one of his cabinet officers talks about bringing back the kind of jobs where one income can raise a family. And of course, ending the wars as Trump is doing. So to break people out of, an old way of thinking and the old world where all your choice was between gradations of bad policies. Once people, and this is why the MAGA movement has grown in such an unprecedented way, because it's composed of people who know there's a better way and a better world, and it's being unleashed by Trump. And if you can spread that to some of your friends and neighbors or strangers who are still kind of stuck in the old world, I think we're going to be a long way towards shifting the American people. So supporting Promethean PAC, either by getting copies of this or just going to the Promethean PAC website and making a straight up contribution, will help us advance into broader layers and dry up the pool of people who are susceptible to the insanity.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you very much, Susan. And thank you to everyone on the chat here and joining us every week. We have about 1,500 people tuning in. Thank you to every one of you. Please hit the like button if you haven't yet already. We're about 500 away from reaching 1,500 likes. That will really help us boost this show's distribution on YouTube, especially after the show is done. So thank you, everyone. Please get a copy of the flyer, or a few copies of the flyer. We made these to be icebreakers, right? It'll give you something to talk about. It can help lead a discussion. There's no propaganda on this. Everything is actually factual stuff that Trump is currently doing. So this isn't meant to be some kind of inflammatory thing. This is actually meant to explain to people what Trump's policies actually are. So you can get that flyer here right at the link below. Okay, so we're going to continue here. We have about 30 minutes or so before Barbara has to leave us. So let's see if we can get some more stuff in here. First, I want to give a shout out to Dog Nose. Thank you for your support and for tuning in every week. Really appreciate your support. Okay, so I'm going to take a question really quickly here from our super chat. I don't know what's currently going on with James O'Keefe, but I'm just throw it out there to see if we have any answers. What are your thoughts on James O'Keefe's latest findings? I'm sorry, I don't know what those are. Maybe somebody in the chat can tell us. Do you think the three-letter agencies will be in a line of fire? Thank you, Erica, for the question. Barbara, Susan, do you know what he's up to currently? Let me check the chat.
I don't.
Barbara?
I don't really have some notion kind of in my head that he's basically going out and talking to the stay-behinds in the Washington area from Obama and Biden. and exposing them. Generally, I don't know specifically what his latest findings are. And yes, the 3-letter agencies are in the line of fire. You have to take a look at what Tulsi Gabbard in particular is doing. She has a task force which is actually going through all of this stuff in terms of the weaponization of government, in terms of the color revolution that is still being conducted against us. And she is really going into all of the classified information, which keeps that from being disclosed, and figuring out what to disclose and how to disclose it. So I think she's being truly heroic in what she's doing. And she's getting pushback, obviously, from, the deep state, because these are the secrets which they never wanted to be brought into sunlight or exposed. So they're very much in the line of fire. And we'll just have to see what the results are of what Tulsi actually finds and how much it actually gets supported overall by the Trump movement. I think that it's very clear that the president truly appreciates what she's doing, but it's causing a lot of indigestion in the stay-behinds, to say the least.
Thank you very much, Barbara. And thank you, Eric, for the support. We really appreciate the super chat. Okay,
I just saw something that popped up in the chat, Adam, that it was from Robbie Ann, I believe. She's no longer on. Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Why don't you put it up there? Because I think that it's very much in line with what Promethean PAC is doing, where she says many Republican county parties are still I think she means the Uniparty. I tried the local Republican Party and was disappointed. Is there any way to start a MAGA-only party? We don't need to start a new party. You have to go into these local parties and you have to start to fight. You have to find people like you. You have to find other MAGA people. We've gone through that in Michigan. We have friends in California, Texas, and elsewhere. There's very few, certainly state parties that are totally in sync with Donald Trump. They may, quote, support him, but do they actually understand what he's doing? No. Some of them don't support him. There's still stay behind operations from the Uniparty and so on. And it's a mixed bag at the state and local level. But I can tell you what we've done here in Michigan. For 3 to 4 years, we've just been out there active in our local organizations, still doing our own thing, recruiting other people around the state to what Trump is really doing. Through the work of Promethean PAC and Promethean Action, lifting up the understanding of the actual MAGA base so that it's much more effective in terms of influencing or taking over its local parties. And I will say that as a result of a lot of hard work that, our team here on the ground in Michigan has carried out, I did end up getting elected as coalition's vice chair of the Michigan Republican Party back in March. That's because we took Promethean ideas into the Republican Party. We didn't try and create something new.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, the next set of questions I've heard the chat. The next set of questions are going to be on the UK and what's going on with the crown and stuff. So let me just get to that question here. We're 23. Okay, here we go. I'm also going to give a quick actually let me go ahead and give a quick shout out here to Jeff in Utah. So thank you, Jeff, for your support and for joining us every Thursday. Thank you. Also, thank you for waiting. I know this has kind of been in the queue here for about 10 minutes. So I'm going to ask questions on England and the UK and other colonies here. Do people in England know these elites are controlling so much? And that's going to be lead in here. So this question from our newsletter is going to be, hello, everyone. You keep mentioning the British did this, the British did that. I am British, but I don't think you're talking about me, and we're not, just to make that very clear. I would prefer you talk about the Anglo-Dutch financial empire, which came about after the glorious revolution of William of Orange became king, and the Bank of England was created shortly thereafter in the city of London. can you name all the British institutions that follow from this, and how much were the Freemasons involved? I have separate questions regarding how much you know about the law passed by Thomas Cook in 1608, which we don't know. It appears to be that the default colonial tactic of the British Empire was to deliberately create warring factions around the world that then was needed to be policed. One such example would be Palestine in 1915, was promised to the Arabs by Lawrence of Arabia. And then in 1917, it was promised to the Jews by the Balfour Declaration. Thank you, Marcus, for your critical insight there. So let's start with these two.
Well, I guess the answer to the super chat is look at the comments under our various YouTube videos. There's a whole lot of people from Britain who are chiming in saying that we're absolutely right. We're not on the ground. I can't tell you what percentage it is, but a whole lot of people do understand that. What I will address in terms of the longer question from Marcus is yes, absolutely. And sometimes we use British as shorthand, but we try and make clear we are talking about the Anglo-Dutch financial empire. And I want to, Adam, can you share the screen? I want to give a shout out to one of our colleagues, Bob Ingram, because the question that Marcus asked about the Glorious Revolution, the Bank of England, the Anglo-Dutch Empire is something which one of our colleagues, Bob Ingram, has addressed in depth in an extraordinary book that you can get on Amazon called National Banking. You can also go to the Promethean Action Toolkit on our webpage, and you will see Bob's books and other full-length books by Promethean Action authors. But what Marcus has identified is, yes, we're not talking about the poor besieged people of England or Ireland or Scotland or Wales. We're talking about an imperial elite which moved from Venice to Amsterdam to London, with, as you properly say, with the Glorious Revolution. And that's essentially the structure that we're talking about. Barbara may want to say a little bit more about the second part of that question if you want to put it back up in terms of the kind of perpetual war policies they've created.
Well, you have to understand that the British Empire didn't die after World War II. And that's really the fraud of most historians. They stopped looking at it. Can we name all the British institutions that follow from this? The biggest institutions which follow from it and the most important are British universities, which have scholarships and everything else to bring Americans over there. It's considered to be, your life's aim if you're on a certain track to be recruited to this filthy imperial operation. But they always considered universities to be soft power, to be how, if you can control or inculcate someone with all the axiomatic assumptions of how to think about the world, do you really need weapons, or do you really need to spend your money on other things? The answer to that is no. So Oxford University, Cambridge University, the University of London are all big deals in terms of the British Empire. The Times newspaper is a big deal in terms of the British Empire. The Economist is a big deal in terms of the British Empire. Financial Times, also a big deal in terms of the British Empire. They control the media. With respect to the Freemasons, yes, the Freemasons were involved throughout in the creation of the British Empire, and various royal family members actually joined Freemasonic lodges. So particularly true under Lord Palmerston and his ideas for, subverting the entire world and bringing it into the British Empire. The Masons are like, clubs which actually, of the elite, which actually meet and agree on certain policies. They also have a violent streak. They've been accused of murder on behalf of the crown, like in the case of Roberto Calvi, who was found hanging from a bridge in the city of London. to cover up for various sexual problems in terms of the reigning crown. So, you know, those are the key things. British intelligence, MI6. You might be shocked by this, but they are completely integrated right now with the CIA. Operationally, there are in Washington, D.C., as many native CIA operatives on any political problem in the world. There are just as many MI6 operatives working side by side with them. And that is really a huge problem because it colors the intelligence which is available to the president. You're quite perceptive in terms of what happened with Palestine. And it's kind of being redone here in terms of the craziness around Ukraine. You may remember a couple months back, there was a big huzzarai about signing up for exploiting minerals, and we would get control of Ukraine's critical minerals in any kind of peace deal. Well, the British already had that contract with Ukraine. So that's how they play the game, and that's how I'd answer your question.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. So I just got an update from one of our coworkers here. This is posted literally like less than 30 minutes ago from Kirill Dmitriev. And I don't have when it's rescheduled, but supposedly the United States-Russia summit is rescheduled. Dialogue is always better than confrontations. And he does confirm the new U.S. sanctions will not have significant impact on Russian economy. Sanctions is an unfriendly gesture and do not strengthen U.S.-Russian relations, may impact U.S. gas prices. So Kirill Dmitriev is a trusted part of President Putin's wider entourage. I forget what his exact title is, but it's good to know that we could have a new summit between Putin and President Trump be scheduled. Okay, that's very good. So I just wanted to touch on that real quick. And I wanted to get to some super chats here from thank you. First off, Carol, thank you very much for waiting. I'm just going to read this. I'm not exactly certain how much we can comment on it, but what are your thoughts on WinRed? From my standpoint, it's going to be really hard to get away from WinRed because they legitimately are like the Act Blue of the Republican Party. They are like the de facto Republican fundraising platform. I remain reluctant to support candidates through WinRed due to questions about who's running it. Do they vet these candidates? We get a lot of rhinos thanks to neocon infiltration. Well, I believe Donald Trump also uses the WinRed platform for some stuff too. So any thoughts on the WinRed platform?
Well, I don't think WinRed is in the business of vetting candidates. I mean, anybody can sign up and use WinRed. You can be a neocon, you can be a rhino, or you can be MAGA. I know people who don't like to use it for a variety of reasons. They look for alternatives. But I think, as Adam said, Donald Trump uses it. So sometimes you're stuck with it. That's all I'd say about it.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you, Carol, for joining us. We appreciate the support. And thank you for waiting so I could get to your question at an appropriate time. All right, just a quick circle back here. If you're just tuning in for the first time, this is our live question and answer show. We do every Thursday with Promethean Action. Please like this video. It increases our reach on YouTube. And if you're interested in staying in contact with us, the first thing, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have 3 political updates we do a week. Our next one is going to be on Saturday. So subscribe now, hit the notification bell, and you'll get notified when we do our next political update on Saturday. So thank you very much. Thank you everyone again for tuning in. We're going to continue on the questions here. Whoops, sorry. Next one here is from Z Patriot. If the CFR is working against U.S. interests, why are we not defunding it or rolling it up as an activity? Thank you, Z Patriot. I'm not certain how the CFR is funded. I don't even know if they get public funds.
Yeah, I would be, maybe they got something. Barbara would probably know better through USAID or something else, but most of these foundations are privately funded by major oligarchical foundations, and that's who funds CFR. I think the way to roll up its activity is to do exactly what Peter Navarro did last week when he went in front of them. And you can find the link to his speech on Promethean Action under my Wednesday update, where he went there and he just said, "You're a failure. Everything you've ever done is wrong. We're right. And, we're not listening to you anymore." I think that's how you ultimately, I mean, if any of these outfits are getting public funding, obviously it should be dried up. But beyond that, let's just leave their stupid, evil, failed ideology in the dust and move on. I don't know if Barbara has any more insight on CFR.
Not really. It's increasingly just an obsolete institution, as we previously discussed. Everything that was put together in this so-called post-war rules-based order, which CFR has played a very prominent role in, although it was founded much earlier, is being discredited. It doesn't work. It's driving all the countries of the world into a new world depression. It basically is just a failure across the board. And I think, what's happening is that Trump is proving every single day that being a nation state, not a globalist, is the key issue.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. And here's Erica again, who asked the question about James O'Keefe. Just gave us a quick update here. Maybe we can say a bit more. James exposed pass-through shell companies and 100 billion federal contract scheme. So thank you, Erica, for the update. Again, we don't know all the details about the nature of it, but we're sure there's going to be some deep state collusion in all of this. Barbara, Susan, any comments before we move on? Okay. Thank you. Okay, so let's see here. And the next one here. Okay, this one's a little bit long here. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to skim through it. Okay, there's a striking resemblance between what caused China's Great Famine killed 30 million Chinese and the British East India Company's 12 famines that killed 45 million Indians and the climate hoax of today. So in China, Mao forced the population to switch from farming to industrial production so they could keep up with their perception with the rest of the world. Farm equipment was melted down to make industrial equipment. Not surprisingly, food became scarce and people starved by the millions. The British East India Company forced India to abandon industrialization so they could focus on agricultural products, which were purchased cheaply by the company and then sold to the world at a tidy profit. Being deprived of an industrial economy and forced to export life-sustaining food resulted in 12 famines, which caused 45 million people to starve to death. Fast forward to today, the climate hoax. Just like Mao forced his citizens to shift from an agriculture-based economy to an industrialized one, the climate change hoax will deprive nations, especially developing nations, of the fossil fuel necessary to raise the standard of living, which will inevitably lead to massive famines. Just like the British East India Company was forced India to abandon industrialization, depriving millions of life-sustaining nourishment, the climate change hoax will destroy any growth they have hitherto achieved from their nascent industrialization. Okay. I'm going to skip down here. Our North Star should not be a sustainable economic foundation, but a foundation that works in harmony with the planet. There is a big difference. Those who want to sustain are only trying to ensure there is enough left for themselves, while those who want to work in harmony with the planet understand our connectedness to the earth. Thus, the sustainable people are no better than the rapacious people, regardless of any eloquent words that come from their mouths. Thank you, Anthony, for your question and observation. I open this to Barbara and Susan. Wait, I believe Barbara has to go very soon. You have to leave now? Okay, I think you're muted. Hold on. Any last words before you? Oh, okay. Any last words before you go?
Anthony has a good perspective on the actual British Empire. He really understands what the game is and what the game has been, particularly with the Third World after 1971. So I would leave it with that. He's got a good grip on what we're talking about.
Thank you, Barbara. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, and I'll just add, in terms of his comparison to Maoism, I am not an expert on China, but I do know that there was impact on Mao Zedong by a British philosopher named Bertrand Russell, whom some have called the most evil man of the 20th century. And I think what Anthony is referring to is, what was done wasn't really a shift to industrialization, because it was backyard furnaces and other kinds of things like that, which obviously was not sustainable. It was another version of imperial policy in terms of not uplifting the skill levels of a population, creating a circumstance where, as he properly says, in India and frankly also in Ireland, there wasn't enough food left in the country, either because of exports or because of the kinds of bad policies that he's describing. And all of this is the fundamental difference between imperialism and a human form of economics, because what we've always argued, what the American system is based on, is you have to constantly grow. You have to constantly improve your relationship to nature. That's why we use the term American system in terms of capitalism, because capitalism is about the maximization of money. Well, empires know how to maximize money. They can loot a population, as they've done in India and Ireland. Communism can loot a population, as you accurately described under Maoism. The American system is based on unleashing the power of the human mind to understand how the universe works, put that to work through scientific breakthroughs and new technologies, and therefore increase the ability of your society to sustain more people at a higher standard of living. And that's why we have, I don't know how many people on this planet right now, 8 billion people on this planet.
Billion.
8 billion people on this planet. You could not do that under the kind of economic policy you describe under Mao. You could not have that under British imperial policies. And that's, of course, why one of the central tenets of the imperial elite is depopulate. Because under their kind of looting economics, where you're basically squeezing whatever an impoverished population can provide out of them to sustain a small elite, you ain't never going to get to 8 billion people. So that's why some of these satanic lunatics have said we have to reduce the world's population to 1 billion people. Yeah, they hate people, but they also know that their economic system doesn't work. So yeah, I underscore what Barbara said. Anthony's got a really good grasp of the problems with both of these outlooks.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan. All right, I'm going to take a question now that was actually directed towards you regarding the Michigan Supreme Court. Okay, was wondering if Susan knows if we have any conservatives who are running for Michigan Supreme Court or for the appellate court. Fink doesn't want to run, so hoping we have someone to get behind to promote. Thanks, Karen. Susan?
Thank you for the question. For some of these statewide races, we do not, and for these in particular, I'm not aware that anybody has yet declared for Supreme Court or appeals court. Very important question. We have to make sure that we find some grouping of candidates. Of course, they have to go through the equivalent of a primary process. But at the moment, I haven't heard anybody announcing, and it's a good question. And I'll see what I can do to shake some trees, because these are very, very important positions.
Thank you. Just a quick shout out. First, thank you, Susan Fitzpatrick. We appreciate the support. Thank you for joining us live every Thursday. We hope you come back next Thursday and join us again. And also from Michael Connor, thank you very much, Michael. We really appreciate your generous donation. It helps us keep doing these shows every week. Make sure you get our free newsletter, though. The link is in the description. Just get our free newsletter and stay in contact with us. So thank you, Michael, and thank you, Susan, for the support. Okay, let's see what question we should take next. Let's take something a little bit saucy on Candace Owens, because I think this on other people's minds. She's in the broader networks of people in the political, YouTube, social media space. What's the deal with Candace? Is what she's saying is true? She lost her appeal. She lost her appeal and denied her visa into Australia. So, any thoughts on Candace Owens? I know she's
I'm not going to come with some definitive conclusion, except there's two things I know. She's married to a very rich British businessman. That doesn't necessarily disqualify you, but that's something you should put into the mix. And she is playing part of this operation, which I've identified, which is the effort to split the MAGA movement by reviving religious warfare. Candace is part of the side which is, just out there saying it's the Jews, it's the Jews, it's the Jews, it's the Jews, and that's why Charlie Kirk was assassinated. Well, I don't think that's why he was assassinated, but put that aside. And then on the other side, you've got the whip up of anti-Muslim sentiment in the United States. Now, let me say, I understand how the illegal immigration of radical Islamicists into countries like Britain, like France, and elsewhere is part of the globalist operation to destroy nations, to create a strategy of tension, and so on. That's absolutely the case. But it's also the case that not every person who practices Islam is a radical fundamentalist and Hamas supporter. And what we're seeing, for example, here in Michigan, where the patriotic pro-America First grouping of Muslims and Arab Americans in Michigan played the critical role in delivering this state to Donald Trump, they're now coming under the same kind of blanket attack. So stop and think about it. Donald Trump put together a coalition, and he just showed with his Mideast Peace Initiative that if you get above the religious sectarianism and you address the common interests of every human being, which is peace and economic development, you can solve these problems. Just as he's doing this, both anti-Jewish and anti-Muslim sentiment is being whipped up big time through social media, especially in the United States. And again, I'm not comparing that to people who justifiably and understandably are identifying, exposing, and extremely upset about what Muslim rape gangs are doing and how this operation is being run, how that side of the operation is being run to destroy nations. So, I can't come to a conclusion about what the deal is. All I can do is identify she's playing into this operation, which to my mind is trying to bust up the Trump coalition by whipping up a kind of religious warfare here in the United States. And in terms of the TSA, I think under our current government, they're probably doing the best they possibly can to stop Hamas extremists from coming into our country.
Thank you, Susan. Just trying to figure out what question we should take next. Okay, let's take one. Do you know anything about what's going on with, let me just ask it here. Hold on a second. Michigan Supreme Court. No, we took that one.
Let me grab one from the chat, which is while you're
Okay.
looking. Daniel asked, many think TPUSA has been infiltrated. This is what Candace is reporting. Is it a distraction or controlled opposition? You know, I am not competent to talk about what's going on inside TPUSA per se. I think what's important is, but I think Candace is definitely feeding into something which is at least a distraction or a controlled opposition. And I think what's most important in terms of TPUSA and in terms of Generation X is people need to get out of the rabbit holes, which is what this is all lending itself to, and go out and fight on the level of policy.
Yeah,
I mean,
Susan, here's the kind of other stuff. In my opinion, Charlie Kirk was not assassinated, but witness protected with a psyop.
yeah. I mean,
That's the kind of stuff.
this is what I call a rabbit. Where does that get you? Where does it get you to get caught up in internet, social media speculation, which cannot be proved? You know, well,
It's like a soap opera for white
it's
dudes on the
exactly
internet.
what it is. It's soap opera. What was the most important thing that Charlie Kirk did, and how are you going to continue his mission, whether it's within TPUSA as an organization or whether it's simply as part of it? He went out and organized. Most of the people who are into all of this kind of stuff, I guarantee you, they ain't organizing. They're sitting there in their mother's basements, you know, falling down this rabbit hole or that rabbit hole. Get off your butt.
Here's another one that we get constantly. Candace and Charlie both use like throwing some like weird gang signs like hello. Okay. Yeah, people need to get back into reality here.
And the best way to get back into reality is get out there and organize other people around Donald Trump's policies. If you're doing that, I'll listen to your opinion. If you're not, I'm sorry. I'm not going to.
Thank you, Susan. You know, it's just every political movement has to deal with this. We just get people that are caught up in what amounts to is internet soap operas. And when you do the analysis and look at yourself from the outside and say, am I actually playing a productive role in society by holding these radical beliefs? The answer is going to be no. Just because you hold some crazy radical belief doesn't mean you're edgy or cool. All right, next question. Do you know anything about Steve Hilton, the candidate for governor of California? Has only been a U.S. citizen for 4 years, although he retains his U.S. citizenship. Do you know anything about this, Susan?
Well, I know that our friends in California are very aware of the bona fides that Barbara here has identified. And it certainly is something well worth keeping your eye on. You know, California is a challenging situation because while there is a strong MAGA movement, and our friends in California are very much part of the leadership of that, having formed a group called CalMAGA a couple of years ago, which is doing precisely what I said people need to do. Are you bringing Donald Trump's policies? Do you understand Trump's policies? Do you understand the revolutionary nature of Trump's policies? And are you bringing those policies to the people around you in your local community or in your state or in your organization? That's what our friends in California have done, and they're strengthening the MAGA movement in California. Now, that being said, you have a typical situation in California that you have in many places. The state party, while it will give lip service to Donald Trump, is not exactly loyal to the full Trump revolution. And that, of course, then makes the question of who is the Republican Party candidate in California going to be? Is he going to be a representative of the Uniparty, which this guy Steve Hilton certainly looks like, or is he going to be a representative of the MAGA movement? And there are other people running there. That's going to have to be decided by the Republicans in California. Again, I'll sound like a broken record. The way that you ensure the right outcome, whether it's in a primary election, especially in a primary election, because what we want to ensure is not just that we have a Republican Congress or Republican governors or a Republican Senate in 2026. We want a MAGA Congress. We want MAGA governors. We want MAGA Senate in 2026. And that's a two-pronged fight. That means first you got to get good people winning the primaries, and that's up to you. And then we've got to make sure that we've recruited enough people from out of the Democratic mainstream matrix so that they make the right choice in November, and that's also up to you.
Thank you, Susan. Next question is going to be on tariffs and China. Simple question. How is the trade war with China conducive to the economic project for peace? Thank you, Alphonse.
Well, I think I don't think Donald Trump would call it a trade war. Donald Trump is a negotiator. And yes, he will impose tariffs, sometimes temporarily. He will threaten to impose tariffs, as he's threatening to increase the tariffs with China. But all of this is part of negotiating. Now, if you happen to watch the Oval Office press availability between Trump and the Australian Prime Minister last week, you had reporter after reporter trying to bait Trump on China being hostile, China being this, China being that. He will not have anything of it. Donald Trump every single time said, I don't think we're going to have a problem. I'm friends with Xi Jinping. We're going to work this out. China needs us. Now, he is, as I mentioned earlier, Trump is going to two major summits next week. One is the ASEAN summit, which is the Southeast Asian nations, and the other is Asia, the Asia Pacific Economic Conference. He's going to be meeting with Xi Jinping at these. He's very confident. And I think people should just key off of that. We do have to change our economic relationship with China. They have taken advantage of British free trade. And notice how I phrased that. They have taken advantage of British free trade. And Trump has said on many occasions, I don't blame them. They were doing what's in the best interest of China. But now I'm doing what's in the best interest of the United States, and we're going to work it out.
Thank you, Susan. Yeah, I think it's that simple. Trump is a really hard negotiator. He knows the imbalances that have been going on for decades, and it's time to kind of equal the scales of justice again. All right, next question is going to be on the I think I'm going to find one on the UK and Australia again. 23, 24. There we go. Okay. What is the most significant leverage the City of London uses to maintain influence with Trump? The derivative market, or is just tapping them along while filing for a divorce? Thank you, Kelly. So I personally don't think they have a really good control mechanism over Trump. I know the people in here are probably going to say for the Epstein files, but does the City of London actually maintain any control over Trump?
Well, look, Trump and his team are, dealing in a world which has been under the control, and I'll use Trump's phrase again, of a global financier elite. The headquarters of that properly is identified as the City of London. And it has been able to rule by nations accepting this division between the real physical economy, which they've basically thrown in the garbage, and the prioritization of the financialized economy. And as long as you're in the world of the financialized economy, yeah, they got control. But what happens when you simply say, no, we think the physical economy is more important, and in fact, that's how we're going to start actually measuring value. That's how we're actually going to start measuring progress. We're going to measure progress by raising the living standards of middle class and working class Americans. We're going to measure value by the fact that we're able to produce more here in the United States, secure our supply chains, bring them home, make the pie grow from the standpoint of the actual physical economy. And it's a very complicated situation in terms of how do you, it's what's that old phrase, trying to fix the wheels while the car is going downhill. I think that's what Trump is doing. I think what they're trying to do is swap out the wheels while the car is going downhill away from this financialized world to a world of physical economy. And I think we're in the middle of a process. Now, does that mean that the financiers don't have leverage at this point? Yes, I'm sure they have plenty of leverage. But Trump's got the A-team. He's got Scott Bessent, who knows how this game is played. He's got Howard Lutnick, who knows how this game is played. He's got the A-team. And they are Trumpers. And they are committed to shifting things away from this financialized world into a world where physical economics is primary. So I think it's an ongoing battle. Let's just leave it at that.
Thank you, Susan, very much. I want to give a quick shout out to Jennifer. Thank you for reaching out to us. We're going to have somebody, we'll get back to you later about your question. Thank you for reaching out. And thank you, everyone. I see a lot of familiar names in the chat. Thank you for joining us every week and making this show so successful. We couldn't do any of this without you. The next question is actually, Susan, is about your show yesterday. It's from an Australian friend of ours from Australia. Watching the Australian Prime Minister in the Oval Office yesterday was truly nauseating. That such a man as a representative of my country is hard to swallow. Even harder to see that DJT treated him with such favor. Of course, it was not truly favor, but rather a pantomime for those without the eyes to see. Donald Trump is well aware of the recent support for Palestine of this excuse for a man, and I'm sure he is aware of the Australian government's current push to enforce digital ID on all Australian citizens. As Australia is overrun by uncontrolled immigration from nations of a completely different culture, we are left reeling with average housing prices now over $1 million, our once spotless roadsides and public spaces turned into rubbish dumps, and almost all manufacturing industry shut down, so that our economy is now little more than building houses for new arrivals, mining, and agriculture, where we once manufactured ships, trucks, cars, agricultural equipment, white goods, clothing, shoes, electrical equipment, and so forth. We now manufacture a little more than plastic buckets and clothes pegs. All of this, the result of the Lima Agreement signed by the communist-leaning Whitlam government in 1973. We have been screwed over for a very long time, and the despicable excuse for a prime minister who received such glowing praise from Donald Trump yesterday has carried on the tradition of over 50 years of corrupt Australian governments to perfection. I'm not entirely sure why Donald J. Trump is treating the likes of Albo and Britton Starmer as though they are great allies, but I am sure that he knows who they truly are, and Trump's approval of them should be seen as strategic, not real. Thank you, Paul from Australia. Thank you for tuning in every week and sending in questions. Susan?
Yeah, I'm glad Paul asked this question because when I addressed the Australian deal in my Wednesday show, there were a lot of comments from people from Australia along these same lines. And I'm glad this has been raised because I think it's an important question of methodology and how we approach things. And I think also how Donald Trump approaches things. Because this deal with Australia is not about Albo. I guess that's his nickname, Prime Minister Albanese. The deals that Trump made with Britain are not about Starmer. Or go back to what Barbara said at the beginning. The way that Trump quietly strengthened the opposition inside Israel so that he actually had leverage against Netanyahu. Now, I'm not saying that Donald Trump is playing some Machiavellian game with the opposition in Australia. Here's what I'm saying. What Trump is doing, whoever the leader is, however bad the leader is, and I'll take your expertise in terms of how bad things are in Australia, because I'm not there and I haven't studied it, with any kind of rigor. That's not the point. The point is, Trump is beginning to establish a different way of relating to countries, aside from who their leaders are. He's establishing a new system for the future. So what did he do with this minerals deal? What was important about what Albanese said about this is that that Australia is not just going to be extracting and exporting its raw materials. It's now going to start producing them inside Australia. And what is the essence of imperialism? The essence of imperialism is extraction. As Franklin Roosevelt said to Winston Churchill, British 18th century methods are what takes more out of a country than what they put back in. And that's been how Australia has been treated for most of its history. And the question of raw materials is kind of like a very important aspect of that. What I referred to in my broadcast yesterday is the removal of the Prime Minister Whitlam back in 1975 because he threatened to take the raw materials away from Anglo-Dutch companies. Now, am I passing, commendations on that Prime Minister or this Prime Minister's policies otherwise? No. What I'm saying is that when it comes to this question of raw materials, this is a marker of British imperial control, and Trump just disrupted that. And I think what's important is not, whether he played nice with this prime minister or not. He's setting up a world based on new sets of relations, nation to nation, based on improving the industrial and economic output of each nation outside of the imperial world and outside of the globalist structure. So he does this all the time. He'll take the person he, knows is his biggest enemy, and, he'll wine him and dine him and, negotiate with them. And when you come out at the end of the process, you're going to find out that what that person represents just got completely outflanked as Trump is moving the world in a different direction. So I'm glad you asked the question, because there were very, very similar comments in the Wednesday video. And I think it's so important from the standpoint of methodology. Trump is moving the world. It's not, this is a good doll or that's a bad doll. He's moving the world in the direction that the British Empire has feared the United States would ultimately be able to move the world.
Thank you, Susan. All right. I'm going to take the final question for today. Before we take the final question, I'd just like to thank everyone for tuning in. Please like this video on your way out. Subscribe. We're going to be doing our next political briefing on Saturday. And if you're interested in asking a question or getting a question into our queue, please get our free newsletter. The link is in the description. Or you can go to prom.ac or just search the web for Promethean Action. Get our free newsletter. You can stay in contact with us outside of YouTube and Google's control. All right, final question today. In one of the last updates last week, Susan made the point of Charles III being a patron for the Islam Center of Studies tied into Oxford. My question is, what was the Princess of Wales, Princess Di, up to during the period between her divorce and the tragic death in Paris when she was romantically linked to men of the Islamic faith? Thank you, Jed, for your question. And Susan, any comments?
Well, I'm not sure, the fact that she was romantically involved with someone of the Islamic faith, I can't comment on that in terms of her death, but I will reference the first part of this. And again, it's very important because this comes up all the time. What King Charles, and of course when he was prince, has been involved in terms of Islam is propagating the radical side of this for their geopolitical purposes. And in fact, if you, I might as well do a shameless plug here, Adam, if you are a Firebringer or Promethean member of Promethean Action, tomorrow you are going to get our monthly perk, and it's going to include a really fascinating documentary that we did some years ago showing how much Prince Charles was involved in propagating this whole side of Islamic fundamentalism. And that's the important thing. I mean, I would just say, again, divorce yourself from the idea that you can paint one broad brush on Jews, that you can paint one broad brush on Muslims or anybody else. The British run ideological operations within religions, within countries, within movements, within, whatever you name. Our power and your power will be when you can discern between a intelligence operation, an ideological infection, and everything else. And if you look at the role that Charles has played historically in terms of the radical side of Islam, I think you'll begin to sort that out.
All right. Thank you very much, Susan. Any final words for our audience today?
Well, we keep coming back to the same thing. You got to organize. And in order to organize, you've got to sort of up your game in terms of understanding how the world works. And that's why we're here. So I hope everybody who's on this or watches it subsequently signs up for the Promethean Action newsletter.
Thank you. And yes, I have to agree. We represent something that's a bit different than the rest of the YouTube political briefing space. We follow a lot of the people in our industry on YouTube. We have a lot of respect for them. But I know the one thing that we're adding that a lot of people aren't is our unique historical take on these issues. Not only that, but we actually are backed with the experience of organizing locally on the streets, organizing local chapters. We have decades of street organizing experience. So we represent more than just political commentary. We're actually trying to make an impact in the political process throughout the world. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. This has been. You can get a cup at our store. We'll be back next Thursday live, and make sure you subscribe to our channel and don't miss our next political update on Saturday. So thank you very much, everyone. Take it easy.